Speaking of the figurehead, Joe Biden gave the perfect address for leaving office. Utterly perfect. And I don't often compliment the figurehead, but his speech was a thing of perfection. I didn't say beauty. I said perfection. Because it perfectly showed what this country has been going through for the past 4 years, but it showed something else remarkable. I don't know if Joe Biden is cognitively capable of believing a thing or disbelieving it. Now, is that cognitive or is that spiritual? Sometimes it's difficult to tell. I mean, he hasn't had a traumatic brain injury that we know of. Just probably has Parkinson's. When people are diagnosed with things like Parkinson's or they experience a traumatic brain injury, there is often a script in American medicine. And that script is often, well, we can help you with the symptoms, but there's nothing that can be done. Such is the case often when people end up in a TBI, traumatic brain injury, particularly with a catastrophic accident, say falling off of a horse or getting hit in a crosswalk in Seattle, Washington, when you're doing nothing more than crossing the street, or having something fall on you at a construction site. Often you go see doctors who say, well, we can reduce the initial swelling, but there's nothing we can do. Take the case of a woman who was hemispherically paralyzed. It was a horse riding accident. She fell off the horse and she couldn't move one side of her body. Doctors in Canada said, Harold, here's the deal. You're going to have to move. You can't live in a house with stairs anymore. It's going to need to be one level, and you're going to live in a wheelchair. She decided, nah, I'd rather not. So she and her family picked up and they flew down to Renew Healthcare in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. They went there after the team. No doubt Dr. Chavez was involved in this, a Harvard-trained, Harvard-certified surgeon. Looked at her medical records, looked at the MRIs, and said, no, we think we can help you. So she flew down, and they took her off the airplane in a stretcher bed. She went into Renew in a stretcher bed. About a week later, the managing partner of Renew, a friend of mine named Steve Anderson, was walking through his clinic. And this lady walked by him. She said, hey, Steve. He goes, oh, hey, what? She was walking. The ethically gathered stem cells from Renew are based just in placentas and umbilical cords, period, never anything to do with abortion, not ever. And they pay for the births of the women and the babies. They track their health because they're tracking the health of the stem cells before and long after pregnancy. Then they take those stem cells to Puerto Vallarta in their lab that they have built, and it's world-class. That's not me talking. It's world-class doctors I've been there with. And they culture those stem cells so they can put up to 42 million, like they did in my shoulder, my right shoulder, 12 million in my ankle. Those stem cells destroy inflammation, and they go about rebuilding the body. Muscle, tendon, cartilage. And in the case of this lady, her ability to walk. If you're being told something by the American medical system, it may not be true. Go to renew.healthcare. It's RENUE.healthcare. Please tell them you're part of the Todd Herman Show family. That's RENUE.healthcare. Joe Biden was caused to give the perfect speech written into a teleprompter form. We're going to sandwich this with Biden's speech with some of the things that went on the California fire, because Biden has been the figurehead for the party that decided to let California burn. He spoke about one of his great concerns that, of course, he feels very, very deeply. We know this because he read it from a teleprompter while sitting on a pillow, by the way, with an emergency box of tissues next to him, him being mentally as well as physically decrepit and deeply spiritually captured.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
To protect our children, our families, our democracy from the abuse of power. The intelligence service's 100 officials said that Trump is a Russian asset. Hunter Biden laptop doesn't exist, and if it does, it's Russian disinformation. American troops in Syria, what? No, Kamala Harris said during the debate, this is the first time in decades that we have had American troops in a war zone. During that debate, American troops in Syria posted an Instagram saying, well, who are we? They were in the war zone. It's a perfect speech. Does Joe Biden have the ability to actually believe a thing or to disbelieve it? Has he become so spiritually captured that he will simply allow himself to be placed in a chair on a pillow, look at a screen, and read whatever's in front of him? I know that movie, Anchorman, with what's his name? The guy is all funny, everyone says. But this is not funny. It's tragic. But it's the perfect speech. He pressured social platforms to lie on his behalf by burying true information. He and his officials pressured social platforms to lie about the border, about border agents whipping people, when in fact it was just the reins of horses. They even used their pressure to squelch and censor debate about a war, the one in Ukraine. Ukraine is the most important country in the world. That's not disinformation, right? So he sits atop a party that lies about everything from the sex of a child to the presence in our country of illegal immigrants. I mean, they admit they're here, but they pretend that they've shut down that border. They haven't done anything of the sort. They've opened it up by letting people fly over the border. And they have people in their party like Adam Schiff. Pay careful attention to what this man is saying as the fires in California raged. We just heard from the figurehead about dis and misinformation, Adam Schiff, senator from California.
To your understanding, why did some of those, or so many of those fire hydrants simply run dry? Was there something to do with that 117 million gallon reservoir in the Palisades that was out of operation? What's your understanding? What's your initial read on this?
Well, my initial take, and I certainly want a full review of this so that I can form a more complete understanding of the matter. But my initial understanding is the reservoirs that the Palisades were drawing on, these 3 million gallon reservoirs, were full at the initial.
He is so good. Satan is such a good liar, and Adam Schiff is so satanically good at this. He just dodged this so well. The question was about the 117 million gallon reservoir. Adam Schiff, so slick, so good, most people are not paying attention that well. He's saying that the reservoirs were full. 3 million versus 117 million. Let's let Adam Schiff continue to lie.
Initiation of these fires. But they're intended, frankly, they have the capacity to put out homes that maybe house multiple houses, not if the whole town is up in flames, and most particularly not if the winds are so strong that aircraft can't fly. And this...
Okay, pause. Okay, there were some strong winds. Aircraft couldn't fly, but you also didn't have firefighting aircraft. Your state chose not to have them. They had to be brought down from Canada. Let's let the great man continue.
Was the problem in the very beginning. The winds were hurricane force, up to 100 miles an hour winds. You can't fly in that, and you depend on being able to do water drops to put down those kind of flames.
Unless, of course, fire engines can go open up fire hydrants and put out the hot spots, which they couldn't because 30 or 40 of them were in for repair. The reservoirs went dry almost immediately. There was no water pressure. They couldn't do any of this. Right, Adam Schiff?
I have to think there are probably hundreds of towns in California, thousands and thousands across the country that are in equally the same position, that if they had 100-mile-an-hour winds and a lot of dry fuel, they wouldn't have any more water than this community did. We also have...
There are not hundreds of towns that choose to not have water, that choose to pay someone to manage water a $750,000 per year base salary to make sure there's no water. But yes, disinformation. The speech from the figurehead was absolutely perfect. There was a time when Gavin Newsom, who is clearly a sociopath, had been considered a frontrunner to be president. Praise God that we had to have the mentally disfigured, incapacitated, spiritually captured Biden versus Gavin Newsom, who's also spiritually captured, but he's not mentally decrepit. He, like Adam Schiff, is very, very good at lying sometimes. But the more desperate he gets, the more funny his lies become. Remember that lady came up to him and said, Mr. Governor, let me talk to you. And he said, I'm literally on the phone with the president right now. This is during the fires. And she said, really? Can I hear the conversation? Because I don't believe you. And then he had to change the story that he wasn't on the phone with Biden. Here's Gavin Newsom being asked a question about the Olympics.
Of course, the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup, and then the Super Bowl, and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic.
So we're clear, if you're not watching this. This is set up to look like they're standing around a burned background. It's a blue screen. It's a background. It's not real. So it's somewhere in a sound studio.
That only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA.
Does anyone remember the question? Are you going to be ready for this? That was the question, right, Gavin Newsom? Sociopathic smile on your face?
Thank him for that. This is an opportunity for him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by.
Man, he's got a Marshall Plan. For young people, that's a World War II reference. It was rebuilding Germany and Europe after World War II. The Marshall Plan, very serious planning. How are we going to build this country back? These countries, very serious strategy, tactics, dollars, personnel, legal systems. Man, a Marshall Plan, right? Oh, but a simple follow-up question from the NBC News reporter who's standing on a fake soundstage so that Gavin Newsom can look like he is around the aftermath of the fires.
This disaster.
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan?
For
Tell
this
us about
region,
this Marshall
we're
Plan.
just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires, so we're already talking.
We're just starting to lay them out. There's no Marshall Plan. Just like there was no phone call to the president. In Los Angeles, the LA fire chief wants to make sure that she's not the only one who's going roly-poly under the wheels of the bus go round and round.
I want to be very, very clear. Yes, we took a $17 million budget cut. And as we know, any budget cut would negatively impact our ability to carry out our mission. I want to also clarify that I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. It's my job as the fire chief of the Los Angeles City Fire Department to make sure that our firefighters have exactly what they need to do their jobs. And that's why I'm talking to you today. The Palisades fire, everybody's seen it. It is absolutely one of the most horrific natural disasters in the history of Los Angeles. And even with an additional 100 engines, I tell you, we were not going to catch that fire. But with that being said, let me be clear. The $17 million budget cut and the elimination of our civilian positions like our mechanics did and has and will continue to severely impact our ability to repair our apparatus. So with that, we have over 100 fire apparatus out of service. And having these apparatus in the proper amount of mechanics would have helped. And
Everything would have helped. If the people who run Los Angeles wanted to destroy those cities, what would they have done differently? If they wanted the fires to take these areas out, what would they have done differently? Maybe poured some gasoline on houses? That would be the only thing that would make it worse. So back to the figurehead who sits on top of this party of people who allowed Los Angeles and Palisades, these areas, to burn. Figurehead Biden, in his last speech as figurehead, read the perfect line. And it would be very, very tempting to think the old man just doesn't know American history. It would be very, very tempting to think that the people who populate the teleprompter for the old man to read just don't understand American history. I view this a little bit differently.
The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people from every background and from around the world.
The Statue of Liberty was not given to us by France to recognize the end of our Civil War. It was to help us celebrate the centennial of our independence and to honor the alliance between France and the U.S. during the American Revolutionary War. So it'd be easy enough to say, well, the old man is mentally decrepit. He doesn't know these things. Or his staff is bereft of knowledge about U.S. history. Well, there's a third option. Since the figurehead's party has based everything upon the notion that America is rotten to the core, that we're inexorably racist, and that the biggest danger to this country to this day is white supremacist terrorists crouched outside of every capital of every state ready to seize power, that they chose to use the Civil War. Because after all, you'd never get dis or misinformation from figurehead Biden.